They called him a kidnapper, a rapist, a madman who burned his own house for a girl. That is what history says. But history is written by the victors. And the victor was Robert Baratheon, a man who started a war for a woman who never loved him. This is the other side. The side where Rhaegar Targaryen was not the villain, but the only one who saw what was coming and gave everything to stop it.
Rhaegar was nothing like anyone in his family. In a house where men were born with madness in their blood, he was born quiet. Silver hair, a face that silenced the entire court. But he did not care about their stares. His world was books. Then one day, he found something in the old scrolls. What exactly, no one ever learned. But the next morning, a boy who had never once held a sword walked up to the master-at-arms and said, "I need to learn how to fight." Within a few years, he became one of the finest warriors in the Seven Kingdoms. But Rhaegar was not just a warrior. He played the harp so well that people wept. He could walk out before a crowd of thousands, sit down, rest the harp on his knee, and the entire hall would go silent. A warrior with a sword in one hand and a harp in the other. The Prince That Was Promised. An ancient Valyrian prophecy. A hero born of dragon blood would stand between the living and eternal darkness. The Song of Ice and Fire. A vision that had haunted the Targaryens for generations. Aegon the Conqueror saw it 300 years ago. Now, it came to Rhaegar. At first, he believed the promised prince was himself. Then he realized, no, not him, his child. But the prophecy was clear. The Song of Ice and Fire. Two bloodlines, fire and cold. The dragon has 3 heads, the text said. 3 children. Rhaegar married Elia Martell, a princess of Dorne. He respected her, cared for her. In his own way, loved her. She gave him a daughter, Rhaenys, then a son, Aegon. Rhaegar held the infant and said, "This is him, the promised one." But the maesters warned, Elia is too weak. Another birth will kill her. 3 heads, and Rhaegar only had 2. Then came the dream.
A dragon dream. Rhaegar saw a boy, dark hair, not silver, but in his eyes, fire. The boy stood alone before an endless wall of ice, and the darkness pulled back before him. Ice and fire. Not Targaryen and Martell. Targaryen and Stark. Rhaegar woke and never doubted again. The 3rd child must be born of a woman with the blood of the North. But who she was, he did not yet know.
They call him the greatest warrior of his generation, the man who raised a rebellion and won, who killed a prince at the Trident, who sat on the Iron Throne and ruled for 17 years. But ask him, and he will tell you the truth. He hated every day on that throne, every single day. Robert Baratheon did not want to be king. He wanted one thing, to get back the woman he loved. He killed for her, won a war for her, burned an entire world for her. and she loved someone else. Robert was born in Storm's End, a castle on a cliff above the sea, where the wind never stops. The Baratheons, blood of Orys, half-brother of Aegon the Conqueror, the first hand of the king. His father, Steffon Baratheon, was a good man, strong, loyal. His mother, Cassana Estermont, a kind woman whom Steffon loved deeply. A rare thing among lords, their marriage was not politics, it was a choice. When Robert was still a boy, the Mad King Aerys sent Steffon to Essos on a mission to find a bride of Valyrian blood for Prince Rhaegar. Steffon carried out the order, but found no suitable match. On the way back, when Storm's End was already close, his ship was caught in a storm and broke apart on the rocks, right beneath the castle walls, right before the eyes of young Robert. The boy stood on the castle wall and watched his parents' ship tear apart, heard the screams, watched the waves take everything. Mother and father, gone in one night. Robert was left with his younger brothers Stannis and Renly and an empty castle. They say Stannis never smiled again after that day, and Robert started getting angry. Anger became his fuel for the rest of his life. After his parents died, Robert was sent to the Eyrie. As a ward of Jon Arryn, Lord of the Vale, a wise and patient man. Arryn had no children of his own then, and he took Robert in as a son. That is where Robert met Ned Stark, a quiet, serious boy from the north, the complete opposite of Robert, where one was loud, the other was silent, where one fought, the other thought. But they became brothers, not by blood, by choice. Jon Arryn became the father neither of them had anymore. He taught them honor, duty, justice. Ned absorbed it like water. Robert listened, nodded, and then went off to drink and fight. Because Robert was force, enormous. By 17, taller than everyone in the Eyrie. Broad shoulders, hands that bent horseshoes. He did not carry a sword. He carried a war hammer. A weapon most knights could not even lift. Robert swung it with one hand. But Robert was not just force. He was fire. People followed him not because they feared him, because they wanted to. He laughed louder than anyone, drank more than anyone, fought better than anyone. And after a fight, he would embrace his opponent and invite him to his table. Even enemies became friends. That was his gift, turning men into allies. But there was another Robert, the one who drank too much, who visited brothels, who left a bastard in the Vale, a girl named Maya Stone, and never looked back. Ned knew both sides of his friend, loved one, tolerated the other. And then, Robert rode to Winterfell. He saw her there, Lyanna Stark. Dark hair, gray eyes. She was unlike any woman he had ever known. Not delicate, not courtly, real. Robert lost his mind. From the first moment, she lodged inside him and would not let go. He returned to the Eyrie, but all he saw was her. Every night, every day. He built a perfect image in his head, beautiful, faithful, loving, waiting only for him. Then came the news, a betrothal. Jon Arryn and Rickard Stark had come to an agreement. Lyanna would be Robert's wife. Robert was on fire. For him, this was not politics. This was fate. Proof that she was his, that the image in his head would become real. But Lyanna saw it differently.
Robert will never be faithful. Love will not change him. He already has a bastard in the Vale. There will be others.
Ned said nothing, because he knew his sister was right. But Robert never heard any of this, because Robert did not love Lyanna. He loved his image of Lyanna, and that image was perfect. The great tourney at Harrenhal, the largest in 100 years. Every great house, thousands of people. On the first evening, 3 squires from houses Frey, Hay, and Blount grabbed Howland Reed, a small crannogman from the neck, thin, short, alone. They beat him in front of dozens, kicked him on the ground, laughed. No one stepped in. Knights watched and walked past, except one person. Lyanna Stark, daughter of the Warden of the North. She shoved one, struck another with a stick, and screamed at the third until he backed off. Alone, a girl, against 3. She brought Reed to the Stark tent, cleaned his wounds, fed him. Her brothers wanted to deal with the squires, but Lyanna said, "Wait, let us see what happens tomorrow." She expected one of the knights to stand up for Reed, one of those great warriors who swore to protect the weak, to do what they should. None of them did. The next day, a knight no one recognized rode into the lists. Short, ill-fitting armor, clearly borrowed. A laughing weirwood tree painted on the shield. The Knight of the Laughing Tree, the crowd named him. This knight challenged 3 riders, the masters of those squires, and defeated all 3. One after another. The arena roared. Who is this? Where did he come from? Then the knight vanished. The Mad King was furious. A conspiracy, a spy. He ordered Rhaegar, "Find this knight, bring him to me." Rhaegar took his horse and rode into the woods. He searched for a long time, trails, ravines, thickets, and he found not a knight, armor, abandoned at the roots of a tree, the laughing weirwood shield leaning against the trunk, a muddy chainmail shirt, and tracks, thin, barefoot. Rhaegar followed the tracks. Lyanna Stark, by a stream, in a simple dress, bare feet in the water, a sword belt on the rock beside her. She heard his steps, turned, saw him, found me. So what? Dragging me to your mad father? Rhaegar was silent. He looked at her, at the bruised knuckles, at the scratch on her neck, at those gray, cold, fearless eyes. He sat on a rock. Why did you do it? Do what? The armor, the arena, 3 knights. Why? Because they were beating him, and the knights who swore to protect the weak stood there and watched. Any of them could have stepped up. Not one did. You could have died. He could have died, said Lyanna. Rhaegar was quiet, then said softly, I will tell no one. Why? Because you did what a knight should have done, and not one of them did. You deserve that wreath. For the first time, she smiled. They sat by the stream and talked, as if they had known each other for years. Rhaegar spoke about stars, about Valyria, about the dreams that would not leave him, about the prophecy, about the child he kept seeing in his dreams. Lyanna listened. In the north, in Winterfell, every child grew up on stories of the long night, of the darkness that would one day return. She knew these stories since childhood, listened to old Nan tell tales of the White Walkers, always thought they were fairy tales. And Rhaegar felt, for the first time in his life, that someone truly heard him. Not the title, not the crown, him. Rhaegar stood up. Time to go back before anyone noticed. He did not ask her for anything, did not speak of fate, just nodded to her and left. But both understood this was not the end.
The final day of the tourney. Rhaegar defeated everyone, even Barristan Selmy. The arena chanted his name. A squire handed him the crown of winter roses, blue. Everyone expected him to ride to Elia. Rhaegar rode past his wife. Thousands of people went silent. He stopped before Lyanna Stark, placed the roses on her lap. Their eyes met. Silence.
Arthur stood in his white cloak and watched. He knew Rhaegar better than anyone. He saw his eyes and understood this was not a whim, not madness. This was something else. Robert watched. Blood rushed to his head. His fists clenched so hard, nails dug into his palms. His betrothed, his Lyanna, and some silver-haired prince laying flowers on her lap in front of everyone. But the hatred was not just for Rhaegar. Robert hated the thought that his perfect world was crumbling, that the picture in his head might not be real, that Lyanna might not be his. He buried that thought deep and locked it away for years.
After the tourney, they began writing to each other, in secret. Letters through trusted people, long, detailed. Rhaegar wrote to her about things he could not say to anyone else. Lyanna wrote back, honest, direct, the only way she knew how. With each letter, the bond between them grew stronger. Rhaegar felt he had finally found someone who understood him. Lyanna felt the same. One day Rhaegar wrote to her about the dream, about the boy, about how their child could be the very savior the prophecies speak of. And with each letter, she fell deeper in love with him.
Arthur Dayne was a knight of the Kingsguard. He guarded the king. But his loyalty was not to the king, it was to the prince, Rhaegar Targaryen. They were not simply prince and guard. They were friends, the closest kind. The kind where one does not need to explain, the other already understands. They fought each other in tournaments. Arthur defeated Rhaegar at Lannisport. Rhaegar took his revenge at Storm's End. They trained together, the two finest fighters in the kingdom, each making the other stronger. But their bond went deeper than swords. Rhaegar played the harp, and Arthur was there, not because he had to be, because he listened. Rhaegar sat in the ruins of Summerhall, where his ancestors died trying to bring back dragons, and played sad melodies. And Arthur stood nearby and kept watch, not from enemies, from a world that did not understand his friend.
I've noticed something has been troubling you lately.
I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I did not know if you would understand.
Later, Rhaegar told him about the dream, about a boy with dark hair and fire in his eyes, about the song of ice and fire, about a child who must unite the blood of the dragon and the wolf and stand between the world and the darkness. Anyone else would have thought the prince had lost his mind. Arthur believed him because he knew Rhaegar, knew he did not waste words, did not chase phantoms. If Rhaegar said he saw it, he saw it. If he said the world was in danger, it was in danger.
Rhaegar said, "Will you come with me?" Lyanna answered, "There will be war. My father, my brothers, Robert." Rhaegar was silent. Lyanna said, "I am coming with you. This is my choice."
Arthur was the witness. Beneath a heart tree, far from all eyes, Rhaegar and Lyanna were married. A secret ceremony, just the two of them, and Arthur beside them. He saw their faces, saw how Rhaegar, the forever melancholy prince, the man who had carried the weight of prophecy his entire life, smiled, truly, for the first time. And Lyanna, the wolf girl of the north, fierce, strong, fearless, looked at him as though she had found what she had been searching for all her life.
I thought I would never find you.
I'm very happy that you found me.
Arthur stood to the side, in his white cloak, dawn across his back, and he saw this was not a scheme, not a kidnapping, not madness. This was love. He guarded them at the Tower of Joy, saw them together every day. Rhaegar played the harp for Lyanna, and she laughed. They walked together, and Arthur followed behind, at a distance, not intruding, guarding. For the first time, he saw Rhaegar happy, and that was worth everything. Rhaegar Targaryen had left the Tower of Joy again. Together with Gerald Hightower and Oswell Went, they had gone to King's Landing. Arthur knew why. Sometimes Rhaegar secretly returned there to see Rhaenys and little Aegon. On one such evening, Arthur Dayne sat by the fire in the tower courtyard. The night was quiet. Only the wind moving through the stones and the crackle of logs in the flame. He heard footsteps. Lyanna Stark walked up to the fire. Arthur rose immediately. "My lady." She smiled slightly. "Forgive me, am I intruding? I do not want to sit alone." Dayne shook his head gently. "I have no right to forbid you, my lady." Lyanna sat by the fire. For a few seconds they were silent, listening to the crackling wood. "I have heard much about you, Sir Arthur," she said at last. "Your skill is the stuff of legends." Dayne smirked, just the corner of his mouth. "People love to exaggerate, but I know men stronger than me." Lyanna looked at him, surprised. "And who would that be?" Sir Barristan Selmy, and Prince Rhaegar. She smiled quietly. I think you are too modest, Sir Arthur. I am certain your name stands alongside theirs. Dayne said nothing, only turned his gaze to the fire. After a pause, Lyanna asked, The prince trusts you very much, does he not? A warm smile appeared on Arthur's face. Yes, my lady. Lyanna looked into the flames. He misses his children very much, does he not? Dayne's smile softened. Especially Rhaenys. She is her father's favorite. She would always climb onto his shoulders and refuse to come down. He chuckled quietly. And Aegon cried a great deal, but the moment the prince took him in his arms, he would calm down instantly. Lyanna lowered her eyes. For a time, they were silent. Then she said quietly, Sometimes it feels as though all of this is a dream. I no longer understand what is happening to the world. Because of us, everything is falling apart. Arthur stared at the fire for a long time before answering. Perhaps everything is happening as it must, my lady. And the boy who will be born here will change the world. I truly believe that. Lyanna was silent for several seconds. Then she smiled quietly. When I was a child, I listened to stories about a savior, about a prince who was promised to the world. She lowered her gaze. And I always wondered what she was like, the woman destined to give birth to him. Silence. Only the wind and the crackle of the fire. How was I to know that one day it would be me? Arthur looked at her, and for the first time that evening, smiled with genuine warmth. Lyanna smiled in return. One of the last peaceful evenings at the Tower of Joy. And outside, everything collapsed. Brandon Stark, Lyanna's older brother, rode to King's Landing, stood at the gates of the Red Keep and screamed, "Come out, Rhaegar! Come out, die!" The Mad King seized him, threw him in a cell, sent a raven to Winterfell, summoned his father, Rickard Stark. The old lord came, thinking he would save his son. Aerys killed them both. Rickard was hung in his armor above a fire. The steel heated, and he burned alive inside his own armor. His screams echoed through the throne room. Brandon was tied to a device, a noose around his neck, and in front of him, just out of reach, they placed a sword. He could almost grab it. He could save his father. But the more he reached, the tighter the noose pulled. Brandon strangled himself, trying to save his father, who burned before his eyes. The Mad King laughed. Word reached the tower. Lyanna's father and brother, dead, burned by the Mad King. Lyanna wept for a long time. Then she said, "This is all my fault. They are gone because of me." Rhaegar said, "This is not your fault. My father did this, not you." They both understood the price of saving the world turned out to be worse than they imagined, but it was too late to turn back. Everyone said the same thing. Rhaegar Targaryen took her, by force. Robert heard this, and the world turned red. His Lyanna, his betrothed, stolen. He did not ask questions, did not search for the truth. In his head there was one thought: Rhaegar took what belongs to me, and Rhaegar will die for it. Then Aerys demanded the heads of Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. And here is what matters. Robert did not start the war. Jon Arryn did. The man who spent his entire life teaching Robert and Ned about honor looked at the order to kill his own wards and refused the king. Jon Arryn raised his banners. The Vale rose. The North rose. The Stormlands rose. War. Robert raced to Storm's End to raise his army. But not all his bannermen stood with him. Lords Grandison, Catherine, and Fell remained loyal to the crown. They gathered their forces and marched towards Summerhall, planning to unite and strike Storm's End. Robert found out, and did what he did best. He did not wait. A forced march. He struck before the three armies could join, and broke them, one by one. Lord Fell died in battle. His son was taken prisoner. Grandison and Catherine surrendered, and all three eventually joined Robert's side. That was Robert Baratheon, a man who won, and then extended his hand to the defeated. Men did not follow him out of fear. They followed out of respect. After these victories, half the Stormlands were already his. Robert pushed further, to Ashford, into the Reach. And there, for the first time, he lost. Randyll Tarly, the finest commander in the Reach, hit the vanguard before Robert could form his lines. Fast, hard, without warning. Lord Catherine, who had just switched to Robert's side, was killed by Tarly. His head was sent to the Mad King. Robert was broken. For the first time in his life, he fled north with a handful of men, wounded without an army. Mace Tyrell, Lord of the Reach, marched his enormous host to Storm's End and began a siege. Inside the castle, Stannis Baratheon, Robert's younger brother. He was 19. On his shoulders, the garrison, the walls, and little Renly. Tyrell did not storm the castle. He simply sat outside, ate, drank, feasted, right beneath the walls. While inside, people starved. They ate cats, then rats, then boiled the leather from their saddles. Stannis did not surrender, not once. Not a single day in nearly a year of siege did he speak of giving up. He was saved by a smuggler. Davos, a common sailor from Flea Bottom, slipped past the Tyrell fleet at night, brought a boat full of onions and salted fish, enough to keep the garrison alive. Robert fled after Ashford, wounded, without an army. He reached Stony Sept, a small town in the Riverlands, and hid. The Mad King sent Jon Connington after him, his best commander, young, fierce, loyal to Rhaegar. Connington brought an army into Stony Sept and began searching the town, house by house, tavern by tavern, brothel by brothel. Robert hid. The townspeople, ordinary people, sheltered him, hid him in cellars, behind walls, in strangers' beds. Because even wounded, even running, Robert was a man people risked their lives for. Connington did not find him, and then Ned arrived. Ned Stark and Hoster Tully, with the armies of the North and the Riverlands, hit Stony Sept from both sides. The bells in the Sept rang through the entire battle. They never stopped. Connington was crushed, fled into exile, his lands taken, his name erased. Robert came out of the cellar, alive, angrier than ever.
Took you long enough, Stark. I was starting to think the North had forgotten the way south.
Rhaegar received news, each worse than the last. Rebel armies growing, his father burning people every day, the kingdom falling apart. When word came that Robert was marching on King's Landing, Rhaegar knew. He could wait no longer. The day came when Rhaegar had to leave. Not for a time, for war. Rhaegar was leaving. The Mad King had summoned him back. The war demanded its prince. Arthur stood before him. They looked at each other. Two lives woven together through battles, tournaments, quiet evenings in the ruins of Summerhall. Rhaegar said, "I know you would want to ride with me, my friend, but I need you here. You are my shield, my brother, the one I trust above all others." Rhaegar said, "If I do not return, protect him, protect her, whatever happens." Arthur, the greatest swordsman alive, could have ridden with Rhaegar to the Trident. Many would say later, if Arthur had been there, Rhaegar would not have died. Perhaps. Arthur was stronger than Robert, but Rhaegar asked him to stay, and Arthur stayed. He knelt, placed his hand on the hilt of Dawn, and gave his word. Lyanna was close to term. He held her for a long time. Lyanna stood and watched as the man she loved walked away. She understood he might not come back. Arthur was not alone. With him were two others, Sir Oswell Went and Sir Gerald Hightower. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, the White Bull, they called him, for his enormous strength. They did not believe in prophecies the way Arthur did. For Hightower, the world was simple. There is an oath, there is a post, you stand or you fall. Prophecies are for maesters and bookmen, not for knights. Went was practical. He saw the world burning, saw that they were called traitors, that 3 of the finest swords in the realm stood in the Dornish mountains instead of fighting at the Trident. One evening by the fire, Went said, "The world is burning, Gerald. They will call us traitors." Arthur answered, "Let them. We are not protecting a crown. We are protecting the life he entrusted to us." Hightower was silent for a long time, then said, "I have lived long enough to know honor is not what people say about you. It is what you do when no one is watching. I am with you, Arthur." 3 nights, by a fire in the mountains of Dorne. They knew they would most likely die here. They knew no one would remember their sacrifice, that history would be written by the victors, and in that history, they would be the villains. But they stayed, because Arthur stayed, and that was enough. Battle of the Bells was the turning point. The Mad King realized the rebels were not just troublemakers, they were a force. And he summoned Rhaegar from hiding. Rhaegar returned, assembled an army, loyalists, Dornishmen, lined up on the southern bank of the Trident. Robert stood on the northern bank. His army, Northmen, Stormlanders, Valemen, River Lords. 2 armies, 1 river, 1 day. Robert put on his armor, the horned helmet, took his hammer. On the other side, Rhaegar, black armor, a ruby dragon on his chest. Robert looked at him across the field and saw one man, the man who took his Lyanna, the man who destroyed his dream. Nothing else mattered. The armies clashed. Robert and Rhaegar met on the battlefield.
Rubies scattered, red stones into the mud. Years later, people still found them in the river. They called the place the Ruby Ford. Rhaegar fell, silver hair in blood, black armor in the dirt. He did not think of the throne, did not think of the war. He thought of her, of the boy, whether there had been enough time, whether the child was born.
The news came. Rhaegar was dead, killed at the Trident. Robert's hammer caved in his chest, rubies scattered. Arthur stood below, motionless, his face stone. His closest friend, the man for whom he stood here, the man to whom he gave his word, dead. Suddenly, a scream from above. Arthur ran upstairs, alarmed, fast. Lyanna had learned of her beloved's death. Arthur reached her and saw. Lyanna was on the floor, on her knees, arms pressed to her stomach. She wept so hard she could not breathe. Arthur, knight, warrior, a man who had held his composure his entire life, broke. He sat beside her. Held her, not as a guard holds a lady, as one person holds another who is in pain. Lyanna sobbed. "Why did you leave us?" she repeated, again and again. Lyanna wept. Arthur held her in silence. Outside the walls, the world was collapsing. But in that room, two people shared one grief. Rhaegar had not even had time to name his child, and Lyanna mourned not only the man she loved, she mourned Rhaegar's children too. Little Rhaenys, the other Aegon, the boy Rhaegar had loved so dearly. Lyanna asked Arthur, "If anything happens to me, his name is Aegon, Aegon Targaryen." She named her son after his fallen brother, after the child Rhaegar had loved so much. Robert Baratheon's rebellion tore the kingdom apart. Starks, Baratheons, Arryns, Tullys. Half of Westeros rose against the Mad King, and Tywin sat in Casterly Rock, silent. Both sides sent ravens, begging for help. Tywin answered neither. Not one, not the other. He waited, calculated, watched. When Rhaegar fell at the Trident, Tywin understood. It was decided. The Targaryens had lost. And then he moved. 12,000 Lannister soldiers to the gates of King's Landing. Tywin sent word to Aerys, "I have come to help." Aerys believed him. Grand Maester Pycelle convinced him. "The Lannisters are on our side. Open the gates." The gates opened. The Lannisters entered. Pillage, murder, chaos. 20 years Tywin had built this kingdom, and in one night allowed it to be drowned in blood. And the price was children. Elia Martell, Rhaegar's wife, was hiding with her children in the royal chambers. Little Rhaenys had crawled beneath her father's bed. The infant Aegon was in his mother's arms. No one spared them. Not the woman, not the children. They did not survive that night. Whether he ordered it or merely allowed it to happen, no one knows. But he accepted the result and did not punish those responsible. The dead Targaryen heirs became the greatest proof of loyalty to the new regime. When Ned entered, he saw Jaime on the Iron Throne, in a white cloak splattered with blood, and bodies at the foot of the throne. Robert arrived later. Ned said, "Those were children." Robert said nothing, not a word. That was the first crack between them. It would never heal. The Mad King, dead, killed by Jaime Lannister. King's Landing had fallen. Rhaegar's children, Aegon and Rhaenys, dead. killed by Tywin Lannister's men, not by Robert's direct order, but with his silent approval, Arthur thought. He had seen those children, little Rhaenys who chased a cat through the corridors of the Red Keep, the infant Aegon, whom Rhaegar held in his arms and called the Promised One. If they did this to Rhaegar's children in the capital, what would they do to the child here? And now, Eddard Stark was riding toward the Tower of Joy, Lyanna's brother, but also Robert's right hand, a man who had fought alongside the usurper. Arthur understood. Ned did not know the truth. Ned believed Lyanna was kidnapped, that she was a prisoner, that Arthur was an accomplice to rape. Ned was coming to save his sister, with anger, with grief, with fury. Words would not help. Arthur knew this. If he said, Rhaegar and Lyanna loved each other, Ned would take it as the vilest lie imaginable. And if Arthur stepped aside, if he gave up the child, what then? Ned would bring him to Robert? Robert would see Rhaegar's son, and do what? Arthur could not take that risk, could not know that Ned would prove noble enough to protect the child, could not know that Ned would name him his own bastard and carry that lie until the end. He knew one thing. Rhaegar asked him to protect his son, at any cost. Dust on the horizon. 7 riders. Ned Stark, in front. 3 knights of the Kingsguard stood before the Tower of Joy, in white cloaks, armed. Arthur, with dawn across his back. Ned stopped his horse, looked at them. In his eyes, fury, pain, loss. "Why were you not there, to protect your prince?" said Ned. Arthur answered, "Our prince commanded us to a more important duty." Ned flared. "Duty? You call this duty, while her family was being slaughtered?" Arthur was silent. He could have told them everything, about the love, the marriage, the child, but he saw Ned's eyes and knew. Right now, words were useless. The anger was too great. Hightower said, "The Kingsguard does not flee." Arthur fought not with hatred, with desperation. He knew Ned was a good man, knew that before him stood Lyanna's brother. But good men in this war had already handed children over to die. Arthur could not take the risk. A promise is heavier than life. The fight was short and terrible, 7 against 3. Went fell. Hightower fell. Arthur fought alone, against all of them. Howland Reed, a small crannogman from the neck, the very man Lyanna had once defended, struck from behind, saved Ned. Arthur Dayne fell, dawn in blood, the white cloak in the dust. The last sword of the morning went dark. Ned climbed the tower and found what he did not expect. Not a prisoner, his sister, dying, a baby in her arms, and a truth that changed everything. Arthur Dayne never learned this, never learned that Ned turned out to be the man who could be trusted with the child. Never learned that Ned named the boy John and protected him for a lifetime. Never learned that the promise he made to Rhaegar was kept, not by his hands, but kept. After the battle, Ned took Dawn, rode to Starfall, to the Dayne castle, and returned the sword to Arthur's sister, Ashara. Ned Stark, the man who killed Arthur Dayne, brought his sword home, because even an enemy deserves honor. Ashara, a loving sister, her beloved brother, honest, kind, strong, who had carried her on his shoulders, who loved her more than anyone, and she loved him more than anyone, was gone. She could not bear it, could not live in a world without her brother. They say that after Arthur's death, Ashara could not endure the loss, and one day she threw herself into the sea from the cliffs of Starfall. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, the finest knight of his generation. The world remembered him as the guard of a kidnapper, a man who watched over a prisoner while the world burned. But the truth was different. He guarded love. He guarded a promise. Robert learned only one thing. Lyanna is dead. In front of people, he took the news like a warrior, clenched his jaw, nodded, not a word. Then he left, alone, into the woods, away from people, away from eyes. And there he broke. He wept like a child, a massive man on his knees in the dirt, a howl tearing out from somewhere deep inside. He had not lost a girl, he had lost the image, that perfect life he had built in his head, that Lyanna who waited for him, loved him, who was his. He never knew what it felt like to hold the one he loved in his arms. For the first time in his life, he had loved, and that love was never returned. Her image stayed in his head and in his heart. He would never let anyone else in there for the rest of his life. He won the war, killed Rhaegar, destroyed the Targaryens, won the throne, and the one thing it was all for was gone, forever. Robert returned to his men, wiped his face. His heart died with Lyanna, with the image he had lived for. Robert Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. He hated it. The small council, papers, laws, lords who always want something, schemes, whispers behind his back. Robert was born for the battlefield, not the throne room. Jon Arryn became his hand, ran the kingdom essentially in Robert's place. And Robert drank, ate, grew fat, visited brothels, made bastards across the capital. He married Cersei Lannister, a political marriage, payment to Tywin for his help in the war. Cersei was beautiful, clever, cruel. Robert never loved her, not a single day. On their wedding night, he called her Lyanna. Cersei never forgave him. And from that day, their marriage became a war. Quiet, cold, without swords, but no less destructive. Robert drank to stop thinking, ate to fill the emptiness, chased women to feel something, anything. The massive warrior who bent horseshoes and swung a hammer with one hand became a fat, drunk king whose own guards pitied him. Because Robert Baratheon had no enemies left, and without enemies, he did not know how to live. War gave him purpose. Peace took it away. 17 years later, Robert rode to Winterfell, to Ned, the only person he still called a friend. But first, he went down into the crypts, alone, into the darkness, to her. A stone statue, cold, gray, a feather in a stone hand. Robert stood before her and could not remember her face, her real face. He remembered the image, the picture, the dream, but Lyanna herself, what she really looked like, how she laughed, how she looked at the world, no, gone. He stood there a long time, in the dark crypt, alone with a woman he believed he had loved more than anything, but whom, in truth, he never knew. Robert Baratheon, the demon of the Trident, the victor, the king. A man who went to war to win back something he never had. He killed Rhaegar, destroyed the Targaryens, sat on the throne, ruled for 17 years, and in all those years was never once happy. Because you cannot win back what was never yours. You cannot love someone you invented, and you cannot fill the emptiness with a hammer, with wine, or with a crown. Robert Baratheon won everything and lost everything. Rhaegar Targaryen, the last dragon. The world remembered him as a kidnapper, a madman who started a war, but he saw what no one else saw, and he gave what no one else would give. The world was saved by the one Rhaegar never got to see, a boy he never got to name. Years later, that boy would stand before an army of the dead. And the darkness would retreat, just like in that dream that came to Rhaegar every night. He was right, but he would never know it.